It's freezing cold outside, and right now is the perfect time to get your ranunculus corms started.
I always pre-sprout my ranunculus before planting, and today I'm going to show you how.
But first, I have to go get some soil.
I always encourage folks to shop small if possible. I found some starting soil and bird seed and got it home in no time.
Now that I have the soil that I need, I'm going to start soaking the ranunculus corms. A few years ago, when I first tried to grow ranunculus, I was so excited. I got the corms and I put them in the soil outside, and 0 of them came up. So, lesson learned, sometimes you need to read the instructions. The first thing you do is you need to soak these ranunculus corms. They're called corms. They look like little spider octopus things with kind of dried up, shriveled legs. All of those are going in a bowl to soak for a couple of hours. 2 to 3 hours is the sweet spot, at least 2 hours. You're going to want to see them get full and like plump up before you put them in soil. I cover them with room temperature water and I leave them on the counter for a couple of hours. I will say I have soaked ranunculus and forgot for like 8-10 hours, and it's not that big of a deal. They're going to be totally fine. I fit 100 corms of ranunculus in this bowl. And now that they're soaking, I'm going to leave them for a couple of hours and head outside and get my trays ready for planting. What I like to do is deal with all the soil outside if possible, because otherwise my kitchen is a disaster when I'm done.
I found a seedling starting mix. It's really light and fluffy and really dry. Don't want is a heavy compost mix because that will be too heavy for your seedlings.
Because the soil is so dry, we need to slowly wet it down. When you first put water on soil that's really dry, all of the water kind of just sits on the top. So it's important to let it soak in and maybe stir it around and wet it down again. You don't need it to be soaking wet, but you also don't want it to be completely dry, or your ranunculus corms will just dry out and the roots won't have any water to soak up. Mixing it around can really help you figure out if it's a good amount of water or if you need a little bit more. And this definitely needs a little bit more. So it's been a couple of hours and you can see the legs on the ranunculus are nice and plump and they look bigger, right? So these are ready to put into soil. I like to put them into soil trays and keep them in my garage, but technically these are ready to go into the soil wherever you want them to go. Right now it is January, and ranunculus like to grow during the cold seasons. You do not want to plant them out when it's close to summertime. Here in Olympia, zone 8B, I plant these outside or I start them inside anywhere from November through January. I have started new corms in February. That's as late as I will go because they start blooming in May and they're done right around Father's Day, typically. If you're ready to put them into your garden beds or into pots outside, you're going to want to plant them maybe 1 to 2 inches deep. They don't have to go too deep. And you put their legs facing down. The plant will grow out of the top there, and roots will come out of the bottom of those little spider legs. Because I put them in trays, I'll show you, I actually just kind of set them on top enough to where their legs will be in the soil, cover them up, but I don't worry too much about depth because the trays are pretty shallow. So here you can see little legs. I'm going to just kind of wiggle it into the soil, and we have a lot more to go, but I put them right next to each other because as soon as I see that they're healthy and sprouting, I'm going to move them outside. If you're planting outside right away, ranunculus should be spaced at least 4 to 5 inches apart I have overcrowded them. They're okay there, but if you're lucky, the corms will start putting out additional corms. And next year, if you want to, you can dig and divide those corms up. So you want to give them a little bit of space. Some people space them 9 inches apart, and it's just really your preference and how much room you have. I was able to fit more than half of my ranunculus in one tray. And now I'm just going to use some of my extra soil that is wetted down to kind of cover them up. I'm really not worried if they're completely covered or anything like that. This tray is ready to move out into our garage. Where I set them, they do have some sunlight, but I've set them in the garage with no sunlight as well. The tricky part is you cannot forget about them in there. Because these are spaced so close together, you're going to want to check on them in about 7 to 10 days to see if there's any roots sprouting. If there's not, don't worry. Sometimes, depending on the temperature, it can take a little bit longer. After 2 weeks, though, you should be seeing some sign of life. At that point, you have the option to plant out because you see tiny roots, or you can leave them in a little bit longer if the weather is not cooperating. Ranunculus are safe to put out in the winter. However, if it's going to dip below 25 degrees Fahrenheit, most people will cover with either a thin frost cloth or a layer of leaves. I have found that they're much hardier than we give them credit for, and most of my ranunculus are left uncovered all winter long here in zone 8B. We can reach anywhere from 15 to 19 degrees at some times, and they have survived those temperatures. If it's going to be well below freezing for a long time, you might consider keeping them in the garage a little bit longer. But they are so close together in these trays that their roots will start growing together, and it's a lot more difficult to get them apart if you leave them too long. So don't let them sit too long. But we'll check back on these bad babies in about 2 weeks.